think that polyculture is important. We really like people like Richard Perkins and Charles Dowding. So anyways, that's kind of who we get our inspiration from. So let's take a look at what we have going on here. So we have a bunch of strawberries growing. We actually planted 1,500 strawberries this year. So we have quite a few beds of those, and we did some really intensive strawberry planting in a couple of our beds. You can see over there, to try to cut down on weeds. So we'll see how that goes. We also would like to sell some of the runners that come up from those. We have some other strawberry beds where they're planted farther apart. And you can see that we are catching roly-polies. The roly-polies are eating all of our ripe strawberries this year. They didn't do that last year, but this year they are. And we haven't been able to enjoy a single ripe strawberry. So we put some empty cat food cans into the ground, filled them with some cheap beer, and the roly-polies go right in. So let's take a look here. This is my biggest strawberry plant right now, and it looks like we are finally going to enjoy one little strawberry from this plant, thanks to the beer in the can trick. So if you're having any problems with roly-polies, I highly recommend doing this trick. It works. Also, my husband and my kids come down here almost every morning and hand pick off all the roly-polies, and then they feed them to the chickens. In the same row as these strawberries, we also have some table grapes growing. We planted these last year, and they look really pretty. So really excited about those. We have a little corn patch growing. This is a sweet corn. We have not yet had success with getting a really good sweet corn. We grew some last year. It was only okay. We did something wrong, not sure what yet. So we're trying again this year. We'll also be interplanting probably some kale and lettuce in between the sweet corn. A couple more beds over here, and you can see how my husband starts to make the beds. This is horse manure. It has been aged. It's not fully aged, obviously, because it's still very clumpy. A very kind neighbor drops off loads and loads of this to us for free, and it is absolutely crucial to our gardening method and our garden setup. So my husband forms these beds with manure, and then on top of it he layers the compost. So over here is kind of fun. This is our first time growing peas, and it's really getting a little too hot for these peas, but they seem to be doing really well. So excited to see what happens with these. Might put a little shade cover over them this week, because they are, obviously they're wilting right now because it's in the sun and it's hot, but for the most part I think they look really nice. Another kind of fun random thing we have growing in our garden are some figs. We got some fig cuttings from a neighbor and also from my dad, and we've been able to put those in the ground and they're really taken off. We plan to have them as a permanent fixture in our garden and to plant things around them that could use some shade. Next to these figs, I think we have leeks. I don't know about you, but we often forget to label what we grow. So I think these are leeks. It's our first time growing leeks, and I don't know much about them, which is why I'm not really sure if that's actually what's growing right here. We have a fun little greens bed growing right here. This was my first attempt at direct sowing greens, and I feel like it worked out pretty well. We've gotten a lot of use from this red Russian kale. It's really beautiful and it tastes really good, and I've been able to successfully sell this. And what's good about the red Russian kale is that it's pretty heat tolerant, so it doesn't really lose its flavor, and it hasn't bolted yet, and we've had some 90-degree days. And what we did is we interplanted some of our tomato plants, because obviously this bed is not going to be full of greens forever, and we needed to get some tomatoes in the ground. So over here we also have some carrots growing, And we had radishes interplanted with the carrots. So here's our little carrot patch. We also have some Jericho romaine, and I've been really happy with this romaine. I feel like it's been pretty pest resistant and pretty heat tolerant so far. So this has been a nice addition to the garden that I think I will definitely grow again in the fall and continue to plant this probably every year. Of course, we have these totally random jungle rose like most backyard gardeners have. It's full of some blackberries, some goji berries, and some raspberries. Now, we had a really bad hail a few weeks ago, and our gojis were looking really beautiful, and then we had this terrible hail, and it just decimated them. So they don't look quite as beautiful anymore. Not sure what's going to go on with them, but they're hanging in there. So one thing we try to plant all over our garden, and that we're going to be doing more of this year, is flowers. Of course, we love the pollinators. Bring on the bees. So calendula is one of my favorites. It's extremely easy to grow. It reseeds every year. It's frost tolerant, and our temps get to be about 20 in the winter, so having them be frost tolerant and heat tolerant is really important for us. We also have quite a few beds of various squashes. We have some acorn squash growing here. You can see our little acorn squashes. I definitely had trouble getting the acorn squash to germinate. It took a while. It needed a lot of heat. And we have some yellow scallop squashes growing as well. We also have kakai pumpkins. We grow the kakai pumpkins early because we like to use them for pepitas, because they are a wholeless pumpkin seed. So you don't have to shell the seeds. You can literally eat them raw, straight out of the pumpkin. Just rinse and eat. They're delicious and very good for you. And these kakais were actually grown from seeds that we harvested last year from our kakais. We had a lot of success with our kakai pumpkins, and I highly suggest growing them. They're just really fun to grow and a really pretty green and orange pumpkin. Of course, we have a row of melons. We have a Napoli. They are not an heirloom variety, but they are a very hearty variety. They were pretty resistant to pests, and we had a lot of success with them last summer, and they had really good flavor. And next to them we have some more tomatoes, and then we have a bed of watermelons. We're doing crimson sweet in this bed right here. So you can see another manure bed being built here by my husband. He's got it going right there. He always weed whacks the ground first. You can see where he's weed whacked. Then he builds the beds. And we really like using weed cloth in our garden as well to kill any weeds, since we are no-till, and obviously we're all organic. So there's another bed that he's starting to build. Coming to the other side of our garden, we have a lot of tomatoes and melons and squashes growing. So that's kind of going to be our focus this summer, are the various tomatoes, the melons, and the squashes. A few different varieties of squashes: spaghetti squash, acorn squash, zucchini, costata, romanesco, patty pans. So that's pretty exciting. This is a really nice looking costata romanesco. Look at that. Excited about that. This is our first time growing parsley, and it's turning out really well. I was kind of nervous about it because it's already getting hot, but it's doing fine. The kind I got is actually slow bolt, so it'll be done pretty soon, but for now it's hanging in there. We have another greens bed here. We have some spinach, some blue Scotch kale, and we also have some dill growing. It's our first time growing dill, and I just think the dill looks super fun. It's a really neat color, and I just think it's a really fun plant to grow. We have some chives, some, I think it's sorrel or sorrel. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce it. You can see right there. And then in all of our beds, they're not grown up yet, but we plant a lot of flowers. So you can see our patches of calendula and borage, and we kind of want things like that popping up all over our garden. And also sunflowers. We will have sunflowers planted as well. We just love to have flowers all over the place. I think it has a really nice vibe, and obviously it's really good for the environment and for the pollinators and for the whole garden atmosphere to have lots of flowers planted. Okay, this is something kind of cool. We have some frogs and toads in our garden, and we looked into the rules and regulations on that. Since we already have some living here, we wanted to provide them a really nice habitat. So we have been building some very simple ponds for them and planting wildflowers on top of those ponds. So these are all wildflowers that we've planted. And I think it'll just provide a really beautiful landscaping, and really good to have those sorts of amphibians in a garden to help control the pests. Here on the south side, or sorry, the southwest side of the garden, we have some very long beds full of sunflowers. We really like to do the mammoth sunflowers that get to be about 10 or 12 feet tall. I feel like they provide a really nice windbreak. We get a strong afternoon wind and a really nice like shade structure basically. So when the wind comes through the sunflowers, it actually cools down the garden, and it gets to be about 100 degrees here during the summer. So here in the center and the side ones, we have some mammoth sunflowers, but also some smaller varieties. I think about 5 or 6 different smaller varieties of sunflowers that we will be able to sell as cut flowers this summer. And all along the length of the garden on the south side are blackberries and the mammoth sunflowers. So you can see them planted here. That one's getting munched on pretty good, but we have a lot more that we've planted up at the house that are germinating right now that we will be planting soon because they're planted directly into the horse manure. The bugs are loving them. So that's all right though, we have a lot and we're not too concerned. But here's one of our blackberries. Now they're not straight blackberry varieties. We have like loganberries and things like that. So all the way down the length there. So that is what we have going on in our garden right now. We probably have about 30 or so beds currently made up. We can fit about 80, so we're about a third of the way there. We hope by the end of the fall we'll have the entire garden built with all of the beds. It'll be very exciting. Right now we're just letting the back part kind of grow wild. It's full of some beautiful purple vetch actually that's doing the ground, that's making the ground really nice back there. So excited to start planting in the back of the garden there where that beautiful vetch is all growing. It's about 2 or 3 feet tall right now. So that is the garden tour, and I hope you enjoyed it.